The next example I'd like to talk about briefly is out in Hamilton City in California. Some of you may have heard about this project already, but Hamilton City is a small agricultural community along the Sacramento River. It's been evacuated for floods 6 times over the last 25 years. They are protected, if one could call it that, by a private levee that was built in 1905 that apparently has the ability to protect them from a 1-in-10-year event. This is a 2004 event. This is not even one of the events that they were evacuated for, but this is a much smaller event that shows flooding in the lower part of that basin over the agricultural fields. That community had tried 3 times to go to the Army Corps and have them design a levee project to protect their community, and they could never get the cost benefit of that project above 1 to have it even in consideration for funding, just because the values didn't work out. But the Nature Conservancy, who's been active in the Sacramento River Valley for a long time, went to work with them on a different project to look at some new alternatives that have really addressed both people and nature. And we worked with them to come up with a program to modify their existing levee. This is maybe a little bit hard to see, but you can see this is a picture of the existing J levee that is in place. That's not doing doing the job it was designed for, but is not designed to protect the community to a sufficient level. We worked with Army Corps and with the community to take a different approach, which was to look at a setback levee that moved the levee back in certain places. You see it didn't move it back into this community or around its wastewater plant, but moved it back that allowed for restoration of over 1,400 acres of very important riparian habitat within the Sacramento River Valley. This project not only had those environmental benefits, but increased the flood protection to a 1-in-75-year storm. It involves 6.8 miles of new levees, and it's really, in my mind, captures that idea of trying to improve nature and the condition of people all in the same projects. A lot of you may know that the Army Corps of Engineers and Council on Environmental Quality is working on rewriting their principles and guidelines so that we can think about infrastructure in a different way. What do we want our future to look like? And in my mind, this type of project is exactly it. It's designed explicitly to improve protection of people, but do so in a way that takes into account the needs of the river and the environmental benefits that are there. This is just a brief thing that this is not just an isolated project, that for 20 years people have been working to protect this corridor, this part of the Sacramento River Valley. It's not showing up very here, but this just connects a lot of existing protected land so that the river can be a river in this 60-mile stretch of the Sacramento where it still has the ability to meander among some of the most rich agricultural lands in the country. So what does this tell us about how we can build our path to success and move forward? I think the success I see and what I think as we move forward to these multiple benefits, what's key to me is sort of being very clear about our objectives and what we're working for. When are we doing a project that's about restoration for natural causes? When is it to improve agriculture and make sure it's viable? When is it for protecting cities? And making sure we understand each of those benefits so we can plan for them accordingly. I think that, for me, I think we have very complementary but slightly different objectives. We've learned to think about floodplains generally in the 1 to 100-year floodplain, and I know this group has been very forward-thinking and saying, well, that's not enough, there's a lot of residual risk. We've been thinking hard about what nature really needs. And floodplains and riparian areas are some of the most biodiverse places on Earth. But those places that are the most biodiverse are really the places that flood every 5 years. So I think the most ecologically valuable land is sort of, let's say, the 1 in 5 year floodplain. So my vision, I'm a policy person, so I can be very simplified, and obviously it's different in every place. But if we protected the 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 year floodplain for nature, the 1 to 100 in places where compatible agriculture or compatible land uses are, and then really protecting cities and other places to a high degree and flood-proofing them so that they can withstand the bigger the bigger floods and reduce their risk, to me provides a simplified way to think about how do we think about the river so that we're all not saying everything needs to happen in the 100-year or the 500-year. I think we can be very specific about how we design projects like the Hamilton City, how we look at our infrastructure in a new way. One of the things I learned just by understanding the Hamilton City that project, that by setting back the levee, not only is there the environmental restoration, but by reducing the velocity and the pressure on those levees, you can actually extend the life of the levees because there's not nearly as many forces on those levees as there might be if they were right up against the river. So I think we start thinking in ways like that about how we do our gray infrastructure and our green infrastructure and the purpose of our projects, I think that that is the future that the brighter future that I see, even though we have a lot of challenges. As I said at the beginning, I'm at heart an optimist. That's why it's such a great opportunity to come talk to you all, because the Association of State Floodplain Managers, you all have been a real leader. You guys have been forward thinking for a long, long time and trying to help lead this nation in the right direction. And I think you all are doing a great job. I think the nation is starting to listen as they understand that doing things the way we've always done it isn't working for any of us as well as we would like, even as we do have the successes that we see. So I'm going to conclude just by reading a couple passages. I think I can do this without my glasses, but I may need to put it in. But since this title of this talk was a vision for managing risk, let me just read a couple paragraphs here of what a vision for a 21st century floodplain might look like. That human activity in the floodplain will continue, but with the clear understanding that any activity is subject to the residual risk of flooding and that the costs of this risk are to be borne by the sponsors of the activity. All new activity will be evaluated for its economic, social, and environmental impacts and its effect on other activities in the floodplain. The threats to urban centers whose existence depends on rivers for commerce will be reduced by a combination of upstream land treatment, floodways, and floodproofing. In some cases, levees and flood walls will continue to provide part of the vulnerability reduction. And adherence to strict land use regulations by community will stop unwise development. The floodplain of the 21st century will be rich in both agriculture and natural systems. At the upstream end of a well-maintained levees, federally built water control structures will permit controlled passage of river waters to keep sloughs wet throughout the years, maintaining and restoring aquatic habitat and resultant benefits for fisheries, waterfowl, and other wildlife. Levees will be modified to provide for controlled overtopping in the event of high water, eliminating the catastrophic failures that occur in the past. Participation in federal crop insurance programs will protect the agricultural investments. The floodplains will meet the needs of human and natural systems. Most of you probably know where that came from, but if you don't, that's from the 1994 Sharing the Challenge report by General Galloway and company, a report that I think speaks as loudly today as it did in 1994 about what our vision for a 21st century floodplain should be. I think we're making significant progress. I think we have opportunities at the moment to make even greater progress, and I look forward to working with you and the Nature Conservancy on your projects around the country as we try to achieve these multiple benefits. So thank you again, Greg, for the chance to speak to you all this morning.